If you're a conservative who supports work requirements for Medicaid because you either think that there are no possible negative ramifications of such a policy, or because you make enough each year that you don't qualify for Medicaid, and so you are certain that even if there are negative ramifications, they'll never happen to you, boo! I'm the ghost of your healthcare future, and I'm here to scare the absolute shit out of you. Allow me to present a few scenarios. For this first scenario, I want you to imagine that you are a working adult who relies on Medicaid. Now, if you're somebody who makes too much money to qualify for Medicaid, don't worry, little rich boy, I'm coming for you too. You just have to wait your turn. So again, for this first scenario, I want you to imagine that you rely on Medicaid. And you're a pretty healthy person. You maybe go to the doctor once or twice a year, once for your annual checkup, and maybe once again for your annual winter cold. But otherwise, you're pretty healthy, but you're responsible, so you make sure that you jump through all of the bureaucratic hoops that your state requires you to jump through to stay on Medicaid. You submit your monthly reports confirming that you do in fact still have a job and you are in fact working 40 hours a week, because after all, you know that at any moment you could get sick or injured, and you want to make sure that you have health insurance if and when that happens. And then one day it does. It does happen. It could be anything, really. There are endless amounts of tragedies or unfortunate situations that could befall you. Maybe you get in a car accident and you have to have your leg amputated, or maybe one morning in the shower you discover a lump in your ball sack and that lump turns out to be cancer, and now you have to undergo a pretty aggressive course of chemo and radiation, and I don't know, maybe they even have to amputate your ball sack. I don't know. I can't tell you what will happen to your ball sack, sir. I'm just the ghost of your healthcare future. I'm not the ghost of your ball sack future. Anyway, regardless of whatever it is, you end up getting sick or injured, and as a result, you were out of work for months and months and maybe even a year because you were getting treatment. You know, it takes a while to recover from having your leg and your ball sack amputated. And unfortunately, this means you're no longer able to verify that you were working, which means that thanks to the changes that Republicans have made to Medicaid, suddenly you no longer qualify for health insurance, specifically because of this health event that happened to you, which means that the instant that you actually needed that health insurance that you'd been working so hard to prove that you deserved and that you qualified for, you in fact no longer qualify for it. And best case scenario, maybe you figure out some other program that you qualify for. I don't know, maybe you apply for disability. But unfortunately, disability does take months or even years to actually get approved for, and most people have to appeal a denial multiple times. And I'm not a doctor, of course. I don't know how long it takes for a stump leg to bleed out or for aggressive ball cancer to spread, but I would imagine it's probably less than months and months or years. And so unfortunately, even in this best case scenario, well, it's been nice knowing you. Now, as I promised, I said at the very beginning that I would get around to the little rich boys who don't qualify for Medicaid, and unlike a Republican in Congress, I do actually keep my promises, so here is scenario number 2. In this scenario, you don't qualify for Medicaid. You, in fact, just like in the first scenario, have a job, you work at least 40 hours a week, but you're lucky enough to have gainful enough employment that your employer provides you with health insurance through your job, not only for yourself, but also for your children, which is fantastic, especially when you consider that kids are, in fact, germ factories, and so you might only have, one cold a year, but, little Timmy and little Tammy, well, they've constantly got a cough or a running nose or one of the many other gross, annoying things that kids are constantly snotting or pooping from. But other than the constant viruses that Tim Tam keep coming home from school with because you never could convince that gross fucker to stop licking their friends' faces and sharing drinks all the time, your family is relatively healthy. Until, once again, one of you is not. Now, in this scenario, it isn't you that gets sick. You're lucky, and you don't end up losing a leg or a ball sack ever in your life. Congratulations. But Tim or Tam, they're not quite so lucky. And in this scenario, it's one of them that gets in a car accident or finds cancer somewhere on their body, or again, one of the other million different misfortunes that can befall us as a species with fragile little meat sack bodies. And so now they have to go to treatment. And well, 6-year-olds aren't exactly great at driving themselves to chemo on time. And even if they are exceptionally mature for their age, they have a hard time reaching the gas pedal with that peg leg of theirs, so you end up having to be out of work for months and months to take care of the little fucker and try to make sure that they make it to their 7th birthday, and as a result, you no longer qualify for employer-provided health insurance. And your manager tries to reassure you and point out that, well, you can qualify for COBRA, but unfortunately, COBRA is like a gajillion dollars, and you can't afford that, especially not with having to pay for little Tim Tam's artificial limbs and chemo treatments, and now all of you desperately need to get on Medicaid. Unfortunately, once again, because of all the changes that Republicans made in Medicaid, you don't qualify for the program because, again, you are not currently working and you cannot verify that you are worthy of such royal treatment like access to basic health care. But that's okay. You're not the important one in this scenario. You can wait and cross your fingers that nothing bad happens to you. It's really Tim Tam that you need to make sure gets access to Medicaid. And luckily, they're a kid, and so they aren't beholden to the same work requirements because we haven't quite gotten to the point as a country where we're sending children back to the mines, although, give Republicans time, fingers fingers crossed. But either way, congratulations, Tim Tam is able to apply for Medicaid. But unfortunately, it turns out that your state, like most states, has a pretty significant backlog of Medicaid applications. They had a backlog already before Republicans even made changes to Medicaid, but now that the same group of employees has to not only process new applications and check to make sure people still qualify for Medicaid once a year, they now also have to process monthly reports from millions of people in your state verifying that they are still working, and they also have to check that they still qualify for Medicaid every 6 months. So the backlog has gotten 10 times longer. And while that previously wouldn't have been a problem because luckily the federal government had passed a rule that would grant children access to healthcare regardless of any administrative backlog, unfortunately, when Republicans made those changes to Medicaid as a part of the budget reconciliation package, they put a moratorium on that rule and it isn't set to kick in for another decade. So now Tim Tam can't actually access any healthcare through Medicaid until your state manages to make it through that backlog, which could take months or maybe even years. And even once they make it through the backlog and little Tim Tam is officially enrolled in Medicaid, it turns out that Republicans also put a moratorium on the rule that would have prevented annual or lifetime caps to your child's treatment. So they're only about halfway through their chemo treatments when the government informs you that unfortunately they've hit their lifetime cap for Medicaid benefits and the government will no longer be paying for jack shit. So you better start picking out a headstone for little Tim Tam. Finally, I'd like to offer up one more scenario that could actually apply to any one of us because the only thing that this scenario requires is that we get older. And unfortunately, as you know, Father Time is a cruel bastard and he does eventually come for all of us. Just ask the millennials. Luckily, our country does still have Medicare, at least for now, so you're able to get some level of healthcare, but unfortunately, I don't know if you've noticed, but nursing homes are expensive as shit. Even the bad ones where they beat you daily just for fun. And the ones where they don't beat you, those are astronomically expensive. And Tim or Tam, whichever one didn't have cancer, has grown up now, but the economy is still in the shitter, so they can't afford to pay for your nursing home. And unfortunately, hedge funds have continued to buy up all the houses, so Tim Tam is stuck renting a one-bedroom apartment for the rest of their lives, so they can't afford to house you either. And in the past, you would have qualified to be a dual enrollee, meaning you'd receive both Medicare and Medicaid, which would help you cover nursing home care, although not one of the fancy non-beaten ones. Don't get crazy on us, this is still capitalism. But once again, Republicans had to make cuts so that they could afford all those billionaire tax cuts because Elon's next yacht isn't going to buy itself. So while the government had passed a rule that would automatically enroll you in the Medicare savings program you qualified for, Republicans once again put a moratorium on that one too. So your frail elderly ass is about to get kicked to the curb and you won't be able to afford your medications. And before too long, Tim or Tam, whichever one Republican policies hasn't whacked yet, will be picking out a headstone for you too. And the funny thing is that all of this could have been avoided because we knew all along that work requirements don't actually work and they don't actually save us money because after all, multiple states have tried it before and it's failed spectacularly every single time. But hey, we're living in a Republican world, baby, and that means we've got to force people to prove to us that they deserve basic human rights like access to healthcare, because acknowledging that they do deserve it just by virtue of existing means acknowledging that sometimes bad things just happen to good people, and being poor and sick at the same time isn't the result of a moral failing. And that would mean acknowledging that those same bad things might happen to us too, and we can't handle that thought, so we convince ourselves that they're poor and sick because they did something wrong and they deserve this lot in life, so that we can convince ourselves that it'll never happen to us because we don't deserve it, and it'll never happen to us because we're one of the good ones, and it'll never happen to us until it does.